Today we're going to be talking about the virtues of clear ice. And I know that this information is all over the internet these days. Clear ice is a very big topic, and we have also done our own videos on this exact thing, but I have yet to see a definitive video, and today I'm going to try and do just that without being overly tedious and talky, although this is a talking video for the most part. So not only are we going through the virtues of clear ice, we're going to be going through a little of its history, how it's made, and why so many professional and home bartenders use it in drinks these days. If I'm being perfectly honest, there's a split in the industry about whether or not clear ice matters in a cocktail. If you make two identical drinks, one with clear ice and one with cloudy ice, would you be able to taste the difference? And the answer to that is no, probably not. So what's the point of going through the extra trouble of making clear ice? Today, this video will hopefully bring you over to the dark side. And as something of an ice zealot, I hope this video will answer that question for you. Clear ice isn't by any means new and can be traced all the way back to the 19th century when people were pulling ice out of lakes. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to focus on more recent history and really how clear ice became a standard in bars today. And that story starts with the bar Milk and Honey. Back when Sasha Petrosky opened Milk and Honey, he created a custom ice program for the bar, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to. The fact was that he was broke and he couldn't afford an ice machine, and so he'd freeze ice in large sheet pans and custom cut it for drinks. Back then, ice was probably not clear, but the point was to have big ice, not necessarily clear ice. Big ice takes up more space in the glass, and the more surface area of ice you have touching a cocktail, the more chilly your drink is and the less dilution you'll have over time. So the next time a bartender puts a ton of ice in your drink, they're actually doing you a favor. Of course, as Milk and Honey's reputation and popularity grew, word of mouth spread, other bars started adopting the same practice, and clear ice or no, a big rock of ice in any rocks drink just makes the drink look more sexy. And of course, as the ice trends changed, companies took notice and started making big cube trays for home bartenders. I believe it was actually Tavolo's King Cube tray that led the charge for the big ice that was available in retail. Time went on, and it wasn't too long before bar owners found the Kleinbell machine, an ice machine that produces big 300-pound blocks of ice. That's 136.07 kilograms to the rest of the world. But Kleinbell machines are huge and like $20,000. And who can afford that? So they first began ordering blocks of ice from local ice companies who had Kleinbells, and they started sourcing that good clear ice. Then over time, enterprising bar owners such as Richard Boccato and Eric Alpern opened their own ice companies and started distributing clear ice to other bars. And in short order, ice became a professional standard at bars who wanted to be perceived as a cut above. And nowadays, you'd be hard pressed to find a major city that doesn't have a cocktail-specific ice company. Then in 2010, a spirits writer named Camper English discovered that you could have clear ice at home and you didn't need to have a big expensive Kleinbell to do it. Directional freezing is the technique of using an insulated container to make water freeze from the top down and therefore force the cloudiness to separate from the clear ice in such a way that it's easy to cut away and you are left with a good amount of clear ice that you can custom cut into any shape you want. When ice freezes, it freezes the pure water first and the cloudiness forms last. In a regular ice tray that's being chilled equally on all sides, the water freezes from the outside in, forcing the cloudiness into the center of the cube. But when you use directional freezing, the water freezes slowly from the top down. This makes the pure water start to freeze and push all of the impurities in the mold down to the bottom, making it easy to separate the clear from the cloudy. So making clear ice is incredibly simple. All you need is a cooler, any kind of cooler will do, and a source of water. And it doesn't have to be special water. It doesn't have to be distilled or even purified. You can do it with tap water if you want. You don't need to have a, vacuum rig that sucks all the air out or anything. But if you live in a place where the tap water is suspect, then it's probably best to use some sort of filtered water. That's what I do when I make clear ice. Remember, whatever is in the ice is going to end up in your drink and in your body, so use drinkable water. Make sure that you take the lid off your cooler and you put the water into it and then place it into a freezer and you let it freeze. You want to make sure that your freezer is set as close to 0 degrees as possible. If you have a fancy fridge that's set to something like -24 degrees Celsius or anything, then the water will freeze too fast and the process won't work. The point is to freeze it slowly. After it's in the fridge, you have a decision to make. Do you freeze it for 24 hours or do you freeze it for 48 hours? Each technique has its pluses and its minuses, so let's just go through them. This is a block that I froze for 24 hours. So what we have here is just like a very nice piece of clear ice. And then we didn't allow the entire block to freeze, and so what you have is just this ice shell with water in it. Usually if the water is trapped in here, when I cut this, all the water will leak out, and the benefit to that is it actually tempers the ice for you and it kind of makes it sweat, so it's a lot easier to cut. So I'm gonna cut this open and just kind of show you guys. There is still a little water in here, but it just didn't properly form on the top, so a lot leaked out. So there we have like the ice shell. So as you can see, it's just one big piece of clear ice. There are a few little ice forms here, some little bubbles and stuff, but this is about as clear as it gets. If you don't want to have those ice forms, you can mess with the temperature of the freezer. If you make the freezer temperature a little bit higher and closer to 0, and it freezes a lot more slowly, then you'll have less of those ice forms in your ice. So the downside to this though is that it's a very thin piece of clear ice. And so if you want to make old-fashioned rocks out of it, you get fewer rocks out of it, and also they're a little bit thinner. So cutting ice once it's been tempered properly is very easy. What I like to do is take a sharp serrated knife, roughly decide how big the cube is gonna be, or the cubes are gonna be, and I like to score it on every side, which is very easy to do once the ice is melty. I like to try and keep as parallel and in line with all the other score marks as possible. For smaller blocks, I won't score it on every side, I'll just do it on one. As you can see, these old-fashioned cubes are gonna be a little bit small. So if I wanna do a bigger cube, I can just like cut this in half and then cut these down as well. This method is really good for making Collins spears. And there you have your old-fashioned block. So here we have our 48-hour frozen ice. We have allowed this to freeze into an entire block. So as you can see, we got a column of clear ice and we got the cloudy ice on top. The directional freezing worked properly. And we have a few ice forms in here, probably from the rate at which it froze. So this is my preferred method, and the major advantage of this method is that you get a big, thick column of clear ice, and you get a bit more than you would with the 24-hour method. The downside to this method, though, is that you have to carve out the entire big block of ice. It's a lot harder to cut, and it's easier to fracture the ice. And I gotta say, I've been doing this for years, and I still fracture the ice sometimes, and every time I'm on camera, I end up fracturing the ice for some reason. And then when I'm not on camera, I do it perfectly. So we'll see how it goes now. So again, we're going to score the ice on all sides before we cut it. Because it's a big block of ice, you're gonna wanna cut from the center where it's a little bit more structurally sound and it's less likely to fracture. Pretty good. I mean, wasn't as clean as I would have liked it, but that's all right. And then from here, you can actually cut away the cloudy and get that nice section off. And this piece of ice is what I'll eventually take an ice knife and carve down into my old-fashioned cubes. And as you can see, it's just a lot thicker and it's gonna fit a bigger glass. See, that one was nice and straight. That's what you wanna do. All right, guys, so that's how you make clear ice. There's a little bit of the history behind it. I hope you guys have a good understanding of what it is. And I just wanted to show you guys the cooler that I use, which is from Coleman. It is a 5-liter cooler. You can find it on Amazon. The link is absolutely below. And again, you can use any cooler you want as long as you can remove the lid. If you want to use a big, huge cooler and you've got the freezer space to do it, you can make some pretty massive pieces of ice, and it would be a little bit harder to cut, but hey, you know what? You'd have a lot of ice at the end of it. So go forth, make clear ice. I hope I've convinced at least 10% of you to try clear ice. I know there's a lot of people in the comments who say like, it's too much hassle. It's not enough upside. I don't want to do it. And you know what? I completely get that. But I will say this, 9 times out of 10, you have a drink with clear ice in it and you are converted immediately because it is a thing of beauty. And if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. A mediocre drink that looks like $1 million is going to taste better to you than $1 million cocktail that looks mediocre. Today's episode is sponsored by ourselves. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. One of the most important things about cocktails is their presentation. And your garnish game can really make or break that presentation. So Marius and I decided that we wanted to start making some dehydrated fruit to garnish cocktails. Not only are they beautiful to look at, they're pretty long lasting, and they're functional garnishes in that they have aroma that you can add to your cocktail without unbalancing the cocktail, but just adding a little je ne sais quoi to it. So obviously we're doing limes, we're doing lemons, we're doing oranges, we're doing blood blood oranges, and we're doing dragon fruit. All of our citrus are organic, they're sourced locally, and this is a really good way to help the channel. The garnishes are made in small batches, they're essentially made to order, and although we're starting with, you know, the usual suspects, the really simple lemon, lime, orange, blood orange, we hope to expand into some less common, harder to get fruits, and then on top of that, we'll have some seasonal offerings for you guys. So if you guys have any suggestions for things you'd like to see, definitely let us know. So head to the shop, and no coupon code needed because they're amazingly priced and it helps the channel.